13. There was some discussion, in righteous tones that were actually kind of forced-sounding, about how we had shown that creepy Milo pressman we weren't just another bunch of pussies. I told how the guy at the Florida market had tried to jap us, and then we fell into a gloomy silence, thinking it over. For my part, I was thinking that maybe there was something to that stupid Goocher business after all. Things couldn't have turned out much worse. In fact, I thought it might be better to just keep going and spare my folks the pain of having one son in the Castle View Cemetery and one in South Windham Boys Correctional. I had no doubt that Milo would go to the cops as soon as the importance of the dump having been closed at the time of the incident filtered into his thick skull. When that happened, he would realize that I really had been trespassing, public property or not. Probably that gave him every right in the world to sick his stupid dog on me, and while Chopper wasn't the hellhound he was cracked up to be, he sure would have ripped the sit-down out of my jeans if I hadn't won the race to the fence. All of it put a big dark crimp in the day. And there was another gloomy idea rolling around inside my head, the idea that this was no lark after all, and maybe we deserved our bad luck. Maybe it was even God warning us to go home. What were we doing, anyway? Going to look at some kid that had gotten himself all mashed up by a freight train? But we were doing it, and none of us wanted to stop. We had almost reached the trestle which carried the tracks across the river when Teddy burst into tears. It was as if a great inner tidal wave had broken through a carefully constructed set of mental dikes. No bullshit. It was that sudden and that fierce. The sobs doubled him over like punches, and he sort of collapsed into a heap, his hands going from his stomach to the mutilated gobs of flesh that were the remains of his ears. He went on crying in hard, violent bursts. None of us knew what the fuck to do. It wasn't crying like when you got hit by a line drive while you were playing shortstop, or smashed on the head playing tackle football on the common, or when you fell off your bike. There was nothing physically wrong with him. We walked away a little and watched him, our hands in our pockets. "Hey, man," Vern said in a very thin voice. Chris and I looked at Vern hopefully. "Hey, man" was always a good start, but Vern couldn't follow it up. Teddy leaned forward onto the cross ties and put a hand over his eyes. Now he looked like he was doing the Allah bit. Salami, salami, bologna, as Popeye says, except it wasn't funny. At last, when the force of his crying had trailed off a little, it was Chris who went to him. He was the toughest guy in our gang, maybe even tougher than Jamie Gallant, I thought privately, but he was also the guy who made the best peace. He had a way about it. I'd seen him sit down on the curb next to a little kid with a scraped knee, a kid he didn't even fucking know, and get him talking about something, the Shrine Circus that was coming to town, or Huckleberry Hound on TV, until the kid forgot he was supposed to be hurt. Chris was good at it. He was tough enough to be good at it. "Listen, Teddy, what do you care what a fat old pile of shit like him said about your father? Huh? I mean sincerely. That don't change nothing, does it? What a fat old pile of shit like him says, huh? Huh? Does it?" Teddy shook his head violently. It changed nothing. But to hear it spoken of, in bright daylight, something he must have gone over and over in his mind while he was lying awake in bed and looking at the moon off-center in one window pane, something he must have thought of in his slow and broken way until it seemed almost holy, trying to make sense out of it, and then to have it brought home to him, that everybody else had merely dismissed his dad as a loony, that had rocked him. But it changed nothing. Nothing. "He still stormed the beach at Normandy, right?" Chris said. He picked up one of Teddy's sweaty, grimy hands and patted it. Teddy nodded fiercely, crying. Snot was running out of his nose. "Do you think that pile of shit was at Normandy?" Teddy shook his head violently. No. "Do you think that guy knows you?" No, but... Or your father? He one of your father's buddies?" "No!" Angry, horrified. The thought. Teddy's chest heaved, and more sobs came out of it. He had pushed his hair away from his ears, and I could see the round, brown plastic button of the hearing aid set in the middle of his right one. The shape of the hearing aid made more sense than the shape of his ear, if you get what I mean. Chris said calmly, "Talk is cheap." Teddy nodded, still not looking up. "And whatever's between you and your old man, talk can't change that." Teddy's head shook, without definition, unsure if this was true. Someone had redefined his pain, and redefined it in shockingly common terms. That would, loony, have to be examined fucking Section 8 later, in depth, on long sleepless nights. Chris rocked him. "He was ranking you, man," he said in soothing cadences that were almost a lullaby. "He was trying to rank you over that friggin' fence, you know it? No strain, man, no fucking strain. He don't know nothing about your old man. He don't know nothing but stuff he heard from those rum-dums down at the Mellow Tiger. He's just dog shit, man. Right, Teddy? Huh? Right?" Teddy's crying was down to sniffles. He wiped his eyes, leaving 2 sooty rings around them, and sat up. "I'm okay," he said, and the sound of his own voice seemed to convince him. "Yeah, I'm okay." He stood up and put his glasses back on, dressing his naked face, it seemed to me. He laughed thinly and swiped his bare arm across the snot of his upper lip. "Fucking crybaby, right?" "No, man," Vern said uncomfortably. "If anyone was ranking out my dad, then you gotta kill him," Teddy said briskly, almost arrogantly. "Kill their asses, right, Chris?" "Right," Chris said amiably, and clapped Teddy on the back. "Right, Gordy?" "Absolutely," I said, wondering how Teddy could care so much for his dad when his dad had practically killed him, and how I couldn't seem to give much of a shit one way or another about my own dad, when so far as I could remember he had never laid a hand on me since I was 3 and got some bleach from under the sink and started to eat it. We walked another 200 yards down the tracks, and Teddy said in a quieter voice, "Hey, if I spoiled your good time, I'm sorry. I guess that was pretty stupid shit back there at the fence." "I ain't sure I want it to be no good time," Vern said suddenly. Chris looked at him. "You saying you want to go back, man?" "No, Vern's face nodded in thought. "But going to see a dead kid, it shouldn't be a party, maybe. I mean, if you can dig it. I mean," he looked at us rather wildly. "I mean, I could be a little scared, if you get me." Nobody said anything, and Vern plunged on. "I mean, sometimes I get nightmares, like... Oh, you guys remember the time Danny Naughton left that pile of old funny books, the ones with the vampires and people getting cut up and all that shit? Jeez, crow. I'd wake up in the middle of the night dreaming about some guy hanging in a house with his face all green or something, you know, like that. And it seems like there's something under the bed, and if I dangled a hand over the side, that thing might, grab me." We all began to nod. We knew about the night shift. I would have laughed then, though, if you had told me that one day not too many years from then I'd parlay all those childhood fears and night sweats into about $1 million. "And I don't dare say anything because my friggin' brother, well, you know Billy, he'll broadcast it." He shrugged miserably. "So I'm scared to look at that kid, because if he's really bad..." I swallowed and glanced at Chris. He was looking gravely at Vern and nodding for him to go on. "If he's really bad," Vern resumed, "I'll have nightmares about him, and wake up thinking it's him under my bed, all cut up in a pool of blood like he just came out of one of those Salad Master gadgets they show on TV, just eyeballs and hair, but moving somehow, if you can dig that, moving somehow, and getting ready to grab." "Jesus Christ," Teddy said thickly. "What a fucking bedtime story." "Well, I can't help it," Vern said, his voice defensive. "But I feel like we have to see him, even if there are bad dreams, Like we have to. But maybe it shouldn't be no good time." "Yeah," Chris said softly. "Maybe it shouldn't." Vern said, pleadingly, "You won't tell none of the other guys, will you? I don't mean about the nightmares, everybody has those. I mean about waking up and thinking there might be something under the bed. I'm too fucking old for the boogeyman." We all said we wouldn't tell, and a glum silence fell over us again. It was only 2:45, but it felt much later. It was too hot, and too much had happened. We weren't even over into Harlow yet. We were going to have to pick them up and lay them down if we were going to make some real miles before dark. We passed the railroad junction and a signal on a tall, rusty pole, and all of us paused to chuck cinders at the steel flag on top, but nobody hit it. And around 3:30, we came to the Castle River and the GS&WM trestle, which crossed it.